Last night we had a debate with three candidates for the governor of Indiana, and two of them are lockdown candidates. That's Halcombe and Myers, and one of them is a Liberty candidate. That's Rainwater. And here you will see clips of the debate.
You know, the COVID-19 has truly devastated a number of small businesses. There's no doubt about that whatsoever. And as governor, I will do absolutely everything to re-energize small business leadership in the state of Indiana, by helping those with the entrepreneurial spirit cut through government red tape and get their businesses started. With the help, perhaps, of small business navigators, especially for the veteran-owned businesses and the women, minority-owned businesses that have had such a hard time moving forward here in our state. I'm going to change that in my administration with Lieutenant Governor Lawson. And yes, we're going to get PPE. We're going to get it at a good price, and we're going to make it available to everyone in the state. Unlike the response that we had early on, we could have gotten PPE at a lot cheaper, but we didn't. And so that's going to change as well. We're going to do the things that are going to help our state to be efficient and effective in its leadership role with respect to all businesses, but especially the small businesses, which are the engine of growth for any state, including Indiana.
Thank you, Dr. Myers. There was somebody who asked for a rebuttal. I'm sorry, I wasn't sure who it was. Governor, if you would please, 30 seconds.
Yes, I'll be brief. If you rewind the tape and go back to late March, we basically did have to shut down some of Indiana, so we didn't overwhelm our healthcare system because of the very fact that every Hoosier is essential. We did that, and we were very methodical about it, and that was basically the month of April. We never shut down the state of Indiana. Now, some businesses have suffered because of COVID-19 to this day.
Thank you very much. We are going to move to our final question, and everybody will have about 30, maybe 35 seconds to answer this question. This question comes from a libertarian in Brownsburg. What do you believe is the fundamental role of government, and if elected, how do you plan to fulfill that?
The state of Indiana is about to descend into a dystopian nightmare, and you have to choose which gubernatorial candidate will be best for you. The Democrat candidate who only wants to take medical fascism to the next level. I'm in the hospital right now, visiting a friend. And we have a Republican candidate who already locked down the state, though in the end of the debates, he denied it.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem. 40 years ago, President Reagan spoke those words. And today, in Indiana, Hoosiers realize that they are just as relevant today as they were when he spoke.
Let's talk a little bit about Myers and price gouging. This is what your boy Myers has to say about price gouging. Myers thinks price gouging during an emergency is predatory. You know what price gouging does during an emergency? It increases profit margins, and it dumps resources into the area with the high profit margins. And yes, people do have windfall profits, but also people move heaven and earth to transition resources into that area. If you're going to have harsher laws on price controls, you're going to make essential goods and services more scarce during times of need. Let's hear a little more from Donald Rainwater.
We have crises in Indiana. We have a health crisis. We have an education crisis. We have an economic crisis. But most of all, we have a crisis of government. We have a government that wants to tell us what to do, not give us the information we need to make the choices in our lives. We live in a constitutional republic where we should tell government what we want, not the other way around.
Thank you, Mr. Rainwater.
Sorry, but if you're pro-lockdown, if you're pro-staying home while other people go stock grocery shelves for you, load grocery bags and deliver it to your house, you better pay for those goods and services with your savings because you're old, because you need to be out there with everyone else.
Otherwise, you're getting coughed on.
If you are young, you need to be out there. If you are older and at risk, you probably should stay home. And we're in a wealthy enough society that if you need to stay home, you should stay home, but it should be your choice. It should be a matter of freedom, and it should not be a matter of government mandate or dictate. We have candidates talking ad nauseum about education when we need to talk about keeping the economy open in order to have the resources to feed ourselves, much less have an education. But what we see now are deaths from despair, people dying of drug overdoses, people abusing their children, they're home all the time, their lives are out of order, cancer treatment's been deferred, people are dying, and people on the margins are dying of cancer who don't have treatment. Like, people don't think in trade-offs. Neither of these lockdown candidates think in trade-offs. Donald Rainwater does, though. He is anti-lockdown, and he's my choice. And why would we not worry about education? Education's super important. But there needs to be, something to educate our children for, some future for our children to have in order for us to worry about education. So if we're going to keep locking down the economy ever again, I think education is just superfluous talk.
The reality is that only you can determine what risk you're willing to take and what are the appropriate measures that you need to take for yourself, your family, your business, your church, or any other situation that you might find yourself in. You see, the reality is that there is no one-size-fits-all solution to anything, and there is no, if you do this, you will be protected, because this is a virus, and you can only do what is easiest and best for you to protect yourself. So the reality is the one thing that we do know is that the Constitution is there to protect our individual liberties and make those choices for ourselves.
Thank you. Dr. Myers, you're next. You have 1 minute.
It's government's job to lead, and if I'm your governor, public safety will always be first. And yes, we do need a real mask mandate in Indiana, a mask mandate with consequences for the small percentage of Hoosiers who choose not to protect themselves or protect others. It's very similar to what we did years ago when we told people that you couldn't light up a cigarette anywhere you wanted to light it up. You had to go into an area where it wasn't going to hurt other people. It was also similar to the decisions that we made to putting your kids in a car seat. It's very important to protect their safety and to protect the safety of others. So a mask mandate is exactly the same. And in a Myers-Lawson administration, a mask mandate will be issued on day one, and it will count.
Thank you, Dr. Myers. Last for this question, Governor Holcomb.
Well, if we all lived alone, you could answer that question independently, but thankfully we don't live alone. We live with one another, and together that's how we'll get through this. Our individual liberty needs to be guarded. When that liberty or those actions start to infringe on someone else, that's where we have to take a look at the public safety. It's just like a seatbelt. It's just like wearing shoes in a restaurant. It's just like fire codes. They're meant for safety procedures. We're in an emergency, a public health emergency, so that we do have a state mandated mask requirement throughout the state. It's a strong statement that says this works. And believe you me, we are seeing cases rise, we are seeing deaths rise, and we know how it's spread. Wearing a mask, physically distancing and out of large crowds, good hygiene will help us slow that spread.
Thank you, Governor. Mr. Rainwater, you've requested a rebuttal. 30 seconds.
Thank you. So this is the difference between big government and limited government. Nowhere in the Constitution does it say that your individual rights are suspended during a crisis or a pandemic. It also needs to be pointed out that, unfortunately, while we are told that they've looked at the science, they haven't shown us the science that definitively proves that a mask mandate makes anything any safer.
Thank you, Mr. Rainwater.
Show me the science.
Dr. Myers, you requested a rebuttal. 30 seconds.
You know, if what we were doing was working, then we wouldn't have record numbers. Almost every day in the last couple of weeks, we've had more new cases of coronavirus than the day or a few days before. Our positivity rate is going up.
Myers, you're a medical doctor. You should know that that is not science, what you just stated there. You can't go back and try alternative methods and see if there would be higher or lower infection rates, higher or lower death rates. What you just stated is super anecdotal, not scientific. You can't just say, well, what we're doing doesn't work, therefore we need total medical fascism installed in Indiana. That's not science. If you want science, go look up some articles. I mean, Lex Friedman was on Joe Rogan's show talking about how effective masks are. Go look up the stuff he looked up in order to validate the effectiveness of masks. And if masks are effective, show us the science. But above and beyond that, we do not need another lockdown. Humans need liberty. Humans need liberty to thrive, and Indiana needs liberty in order not to be a dystopian fascist medical nightmare. Just need a little fresh air, like Derek's grandma says. Anybody's grandma, everybody's grandma says, just go out and get a little fresh air with your shirt off, preferably exposed to the sunlight so you get some vitamin D and, maybe supplement with some zinc.